to determine the generation mix required to meet the envisaged demand. This will assist in determining the scale at which the country will need to procure additional generation capacity from various technologies, including nuclear. So at the time, what this says is that there has to be an appreciation of what is the profile of generation, and of course, what is that demand, and in that context, then you are able to then make a case on why you need to proceed with this 2,500 megawatts. I think the case is compelling. Part of the reasons why we are here with regards to the energy crisis is that generation can meet demand, and therefore you need to have additional generation capacity, because we make the point all the time that the ESCOM fleet is aging, and we need additional generation capacity, if you like, greenfields development, to help us to ensure that we are able to secure the country's energy future. And then the third suspensive condition was that the new nuclear power be procured through an engineering, procurement and construction contract, what we call an EPC contract. So, and essentially we expand on how we see this going forward. So those are the three suspensive conditions, and I'm happy to say that the DMRE, of course, before the introduction of the Ministry of Electricity, then went back to NERSA and met those suspensive conditions. So all those three suspensive conditions have now been satisfied, and as a result of that, now we are able to proceed with this program. And this DMRE submitted to the report to the regulator addressing these suspensive conditions in July of 2023. Of course, NERSA still had an obligation to satisfy itself if the response from the DMRE to the suspensive conditions are sufficient for NERSA to consider giving this process the green light. And I am happy to indicate that on the 30th of August 2023, NERSA considered the DMRE submission in relation to how it meets those suspensive conditions, and concluded that the suspensive conditions had been satisfactorily addressed. Essentially what NERSA then said was that we are giving you the go-ahead to proceed, and NERSA then issued a formal concurrence on the 2nd of September 2023. So to give a legal effect to the ministerial determination for the procurement of new nuclear capacity of August 2020, the determination and NERSA's concurrence will be gazetted. So now we're starting the process of gazetting. So we're triggering now, as I stand before you, essentially a procurement process. So we're going out to ensure that we're able to get that additional 2,500 megawatts of nuclear capacity to ensure that we're able to meet the issues of national security and energy sovereignty. So this is a significant milestone, because we know that historically in the recent past the process was mired in controversy. Now we are happy that we've been able to iron out the issues related to how the procurement process needs to unfold. We have met the regulatory requirements as per NERSA's the legal requirement, and also now we have concurrence of NERSA. We are able to proceed. So this is profound, and what it does is to cement our unassailable position as a country, as a leader on the continent in relation to nuclear generation capacity and also the skills profile that we have. Just for the record, you know that we have just the other day on Sunday, I stood before the nation just indicating the work that we are doing at Quebec. We have had over 40 years of operating that nuclear power station incident-free. I think that's important. I indicated that now we are in the period of extension of life of Quebec. We want to secure another 20 years of life of Quebec. Unit 1 had gone out to meet the regulatory requirement for purposes of meeting the conditions for life extension of life, and we did indicate that after a significant amount of delays of about 4 months, now Unit 1 is running and is running on full load. And then yesterday, we then removed Unit 2 for purposes of meeting those regulatory requirements. And as indicated, we are expecting that by August of next year, Unit 2 should come back. Just to put it into context, the contribution of nuclear, that is the 2 units at Quebec, they constitute about 5% of the total generation capacity. Now we're upping, if you like, the contribution of nuclear to the totality of the energy mix. And what we know about nuclear is the cheapest, the safest, and most reliable. And we are going this route. And as NERSA had made a determination, is that there's significant amount of technological advancements that have happened in this space. So it is important that we take notice of that and ensure that we are able to benefit from those technological advances. And also the point to be made about the role and place of South Africa in the nuclear space is that we are the only country on the continent that has got a permanent seat on the International Atomic Agency, Energy Agency. This is an international body that regulates, if you like, areas of nuclear energy in the world, and we enjoy a permanent seat there. So that's the contribution of South Africa to the area of nuclear. And what we see as a result of this announcement that we are making, in addition to giving us 2,500 megawatts of cheap, reliable, and very efficient generation capacity, is to galvanize, if you like, interest amongst young people who have studied nuclear, who are nuclear scientists, who have not had significant amount of work to do in terms of new projects, and this gives us a platform to be able to continue to produce those and commit them to this nuclear program. Because we have spent a considerable amount of time without having any new nuclear generation projects and projects in the country, that has led to some of our most best nuclear scientists leaving the country for other opportunities outside the country. So we think that we are now creating an avenue and platform for them to come back and contribute to the resolution of the energy crisis, but also ensuring that we are going to have a secure energy future. So this is significant. We are triggering a procurement process. So we are starting now with procuring that 2,500 megawatts of nuclear energy. We are excited about the prospects, and we are confident about our ability to ensure that within reasonable period of time, we are able to get to a stage where we have preferred bidders who will then continue to ensure that South Africa benefits from this form of generation capacity. And that's what nuclear is, gives us really a significant and important platform for us to be able to ensure that we are able to secure a energy future for ourselves, energy sovereignty for ourselves. Of course, we continue to make every effort to address load shedding, because the benefit of what we are announcing here, you are not going to see it tomorrow, you will not see it in a year's time, you won't see it in 2 years' time, 3 to 4 years. That's when you'll begin to see these benefits. But in the meantime, I think it's important that we address the challenges with regards to the immediate problem of load shedding, whilst we secure energy future, that we don't run into the same problem again in the future. And nuclear has proven to be a reliable source of energy. So I'll leave it there, Tsakani, and we'll be more than happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister. And indeed, we've come to the question and answer session. We'll open questions from members of the media, starting with those who are with us in the room. By a show of hand, please start by introducing yourself and your media house.
Thank you, Antoinette Slabbert from our board. Minister, will the request for proposals specify whether it should be conventional nuclear or small modular reactor? And will it be a country-to-country agreement? Because there are now more and more private vendors also playing in the SMR space. And then what is the next step and when will that take place? And by when do you hope to have this electricity online? Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Any more questions in the room? There's a hand.
Thank you, Zini Commissioner from Newsroom Africa. Minister, obviously the whole process started while you were not in the space. There was no electricity portfolio before. You came in, obviously been very intimately involved. So from your observation as you came in, do you think maybe there are any needed amendments in terms of the 2.5 megawatts that we're dealing with right now, but also the time frames you've been dealing with the issue of load shedding very vigorously. So do you think in terms of time frames, some of these processes must be sped up, but also do we need more than what we are dealing with in terms of what we're trying to control? Thank you.
Thank you, Zinigo. Any more questions in the room before we proceed to Takalani? Takalani, can you please take us through questions that have been shared online?
Thank you, Zakan. The first question is coming from Kay from News 24. And Minister, you have said the case for new nuclear is compelling. Can you elaborate? And what is compelling about speaking today about a project that could take as long as 15 years to build, when the country has an immediate generation capacity shortage that requires a grid capacity increases, among other measures, to solve shortages in the short and medium term? And in other words, why are we talking about long-term projects while the platform is on fire right now? And 3 questions from Terence Creamer, Engineering News. 1, on what basis is the Minister of Electricity involved in this determination, given that the determination was signed by the Mineral Resources and Energy Minister? Number 2, on what basis is the determination and the NERSA concurrence published as the IRP 2019 as now nuclear allocation for the period up to 2030? And why proceed now when the DMRE is about to release a new IRP for public comment, and the document includes a horizon beyond 2030, which is the only realistic horizon for nuclear? For new nuclear, and why no wait until the new IRP has been consulted and gazetted? And the last question for now from Carol Patton from News 24. Minister, you say that nuclear energy is the cheapest form of energy. Are you including the cost of building nuclear stations, or is it only the cheapest once it is built? Thanks.
Thank you, Takalani. We'll start with Mr. Mbambo, who will be followed by the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to the viewers and the team. Antoinette, you've asked a question whether the RFP will include the conventional nuclear power plants or the small modular reactors, and when do we anticipate this project to be online, as well as whether it will be a country-to-country contracting purpose. I think it's very important just to highlight that in terms of the details of the RFP, we're not in the position to start talking about what the RFP will contain at this stage because we have not yet started the work of designing the request for proposal. But just to give you a sense is that in 2020, the department went out on a request for information, which was a non-binding request for information from the different nuclear vendors to demonstrate to South Africa as to how they would implement a project of this magnitude. And it came out, that request for information came up with a lot of information that's quite useful in terms of the conventional nuclear power plants, PWR, as well as the small modular reactors. And we took that as part of our considerations going forward. But at this stage, we cannot pronounce as to the shape and form and the format that the RFP, which is a commercially binding document, would look like and what it will call for. Then in terms of when do we anticipate this project to be commissioned, I think based on our assessment as the team, having done the request for information as I've alluded to, we found that the ideal time by which to start commissioning the first unit of this 2,500 is around 2032, 2033. Remember that we are dealing here, as the Minister has indicated, with a long-term project which requires that you start early so that you are optimizing on time and be able to commission the project well in time. The nuclear project, we must be indicating that in the minimum it takes about 10 to 12 years to be able to commission the nuclear power plant into the grid. So we're looking at the horizon right there around 2032, 2033 to commission the first unit of this power plant. But obviously, we have to start now with the work that we are starting. And as the Minister has indicated, this is a major milestone that then initiate a whole range of process that we are going to follow through to run the race and be able to secure the energy of the country through the generation coming from a nuclear power station. Then in terms of the contracting, obviously, as I've alluded to, we have not yet decided on the contracting model that will be adopted for the nuclear new build, but it's safe to say that nuclear, or in terms of the procurement in the country, is well prescribed in terms of the section 217 of the Constitution, that we must be issuing an open and a transparent tender that makes sure that there's cost competitiveness and all of that. And that's the approach we're going to follow as prescribed in the country's procurement prescript. Not the country-to-country arrangement. That's not the approach that we look forward to look into. Then the other questions I would leave for the Minister. Then there was an issue of whether there's any amendments to the 2,500. So I would leave that to the Minister to engage in. Minister, I think I've covered the salient points.
Thank you very much, DDG. Maybe just to answer the question from News 24 around the fact that they are banning platforms and then you are announcing things that will happen sometime in the future. Part of the reason why we are where we are today is because when we advised 1997 about the need for us to be able to build new generation capacity, and that if you don't build that new generation capacity, the country is going to run into a generation problem 10 years from that. We were complacent because we had the excess generation cheap, and we thought that no, that's not something that requires our attention, and it caught up with us, and we're still catching up. So the idea that you are having a burning platform and then you can't prepare for the future, I think is a height of folly. And this is the point that I make consistently, that we have two tasks. The one task, which is a primary task, is the ending of load shedding, ensuring that there's sufficient generation that meets demand immediately. And then you have to ensure that going into the future, you don't run into the same problem. And that's why this is important, that we are able to articulate what are those new generation sources going into the future to ensure that we don't run into this problem. So, of course, we are transfixed on the resolution of the load shedding problem, but we have not lost sight of what is required for us to be able to secure a better energy future for the country and secure energy sovereignty. So the two go together. So I think the suggestion that you must decouple the two, I think, is unfortunate. And that's why we continue to say that these are the interventions we are making in the short term, and that's why I took time to explain the relationship between the Energy Action Plan, which is meant to address the now and the near future, and the importance of us looking deeper into the future so that we don't run into this problem. We are able to obviate a situation where we are likely going to have a demand that far exceeds the generation, and therefore you have to initiate the load shedding. And the other principal question is that, no, but you are going out on the next round of the integrated resource plan. Essentially is a document that articulates in the most comprehensive fashion the energy mix for the country. We are updating 2019, we are doing 2023. Why not wait for this process to happen? To conclude, no, this exercise we are doing now is pursuant to what sits in the integrated resource plan of 2019. And that still remains, as I speak to you before you, as I stand before you, is valid. And also when you go to 2023, if you look at the generation sources, nuclear is still a significant part of this, and this is going to fall within that. So the idea that you must stop, I don't think that is particularly helpful. So we're proceeding pursuant to that the IRP 2019 to ensure that we're able to secure an energy future for energy security for our country. On what basis is the Minister of Electricity involved? I did when the President announced the Minister of Electricity. Some of the powers that were given to the Minister is Section 34.1 of the ERA, which talks about the new determination, ministerial determination, determination on new generation capacity, and this falls within that. And that's why the Minister stands here before you to indicate what that is. And then to Zinko, in relation to whether there's a consideration of upping this, I make the point that the 2,500 megawatts is in terms of what the IRP 19 was saying. So we have no intention of amending that because that's what sits there. So we're meant to satisfy that. If going into the future, the IRP 23 suggests that there should be additional capacity, then we'll undertake this process. Remember that it has to go through a rigorous process. You make a determination, you seek concurrence, and I've mapped for you what that process has entailed. So it's a process that has been running over the past 2 years. So the minister can't just come abruptly and say, I'm amending that, because NERSA had gone through an extensive public participation process, and on that public participation process was about 2,500 megawatts. And if there's an intention of upsetting that the configuration of 2,500 megawatts, it will trigger that we must go back to the process, we must reinitiate it. So we're here, we have that concurrence, 2,500 megawatts, and we're proceeding on the basis of that 2,500 megawatts. So I think I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister. And Mr. Oh, okay. Dr. Mokhalapa will come through to deal with the one aspect. However, before he comes through, can we take another round of questions, follow-up questions, and perhaps the last round of questions, and then we'll start with the doc before we get other responses.
Thank you. Minister, the President of the French Foreign Trade Advisor last week said that French companies have decided to withhold investment in South Africa at the investment conference until the business environment has improved. Now, the French have played a big role in Coburg and is one of the prominent nuclear vendors in the world. Do you expect them to participate? And do you have any indication of other vendors that will be interested? Yeah, and when do you hope to have the IRP, to issue the IRP? Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Takalani will go to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Zakan, there's a couple of questions. I think there are more than 8 or 9.
Okay.
For now, I will make an attempt to go through all of them with your kind permission.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. We have Carol Patton here from News 24. The question is, Minister, why have you decided to announce this procurement now when IRP 2023 is imminent, and would not be better governance to wait until IRP 2023 is published and public consultation has been done? And we have Wendell from Reuters. The question is, Minister, you mentioned the basis for this was IRP 2019, and how will the new IRP 2023 influence procurement process, and when will the request for proposals go out, and when is this expected to be finalized? And Tinen Erasmus Business Day. The Minister said nuclear is the cheapest form of energy available. Please, can this be quantified? And what is the current per kilowatt cost of energy from Quebec? And how does this compare with energy procured in the most recent rounds of the renewable energy independent power procurement rounds? And Terence Creamer, Engineering News. When will the RFP be published, and what is the time frame for bid submissions? Chris Eland, Business Intelligence. Please, can the Minister advise what he expects the price per kilowatt to be for new nuclear power in South Africa, and when the Minister indicates that nuclear power is the cheapest? And Susan Comrie, Amabungani Center for Investigative Journalism. During Africa Energy Week, Russia's Rosatom was touting its solution of floating nuclear power plants. Does the determination specify that the solution should be on land only, or will be floating nuclear plants be considered as well? And Kay Cohen, News 24. Considering the push for a transition to a higher percentage of renewables, which is now the policy, what business case was made out for nuclear by 2032-33, and will that capacity be necessary by that time, considering investments in more renewables? Terence Creamer, Engineering News. What is the status of the launch of bid window 6 for renewables, the next battery storage round, and the inaugural gas to power program, which are all actual pre-2030 allocations in the IRP 2019? And Stembile Klele from Bloomberg. The Minister told Parliament a few weeks ago that an additional allocation of powers will be announced by the President within days. And when does he expect it will happen now, and what are the issues still being ironed out? And Chris Eland from Business Intelligence. Is Rosatom a sanctioned body for provision nuclear power in South Africa? And okay, this one was the journalist clarified that it was answered. That will be all. Zagan, thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Takalani. Indeed, I believe the question from Carol Payton was responded to by the Minister on why the announcement now before IRP 2023. We'll start with Dr. Naftali, who will be followed by Mr. Mbambo, and we'll conclude with the Minister. That marks the last round of our questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to the colleagues. On the issue of the cheapness of nuclear, I think it's important that when we consider the cost of nuclear, we look at it holistically, because the technology, as we know, does provide baseload power, but there are other benefits that it does provide, which when looked at with respect to cost, bring benefit to the country. For instance, the issue of that we are talking about of clean energy, nuclear has a role to play there, and the socio-economic spin-offs that comes with nuclear are also a point that needs to be elevated to say that because of the nature of the technology, you are able to provide quality jobs, but maybe just to be specific, when we talk about the issues of cost, the department did some work based on the information request for information that was provided to look at what would be the ballpark figure around the capital cost per kilowatt, and what we found was that around the capital cost, when you consider both the conventional nuclear power plants, which are the large nuclear reactors, as well as the small modular reactors, you are ranging between anything between 2,100 per kilowatt hour to something like 7,500 per kilowatt hour. That is looking at all of them. But when you're developing strategy, of course, you have to also look at the capacity that you want to deploy. And that determines how you hone in on the specifics around that capital cost per kilowatt hour. So, for instance, for PWRs, we have a range around that ranges. And by the way, just to indicate, with regards to the previous IRP, the value of 5,000 per kilowatt hour was used. But as we looked at the further assessments that came from the IRP, we found that the range for the large PWRs ranges anything between 2,100 to 3,000 per kilowatt hour. That depends on which countries are you looking at in terms of vendors. The actual costs associated with nuclear are, of course, sensitive because they have a commercial competitiveness associated with them. So as we unpack and look at the RFP, there will be certain nuances that are associated with the negotiations that would unfold. Things such as the environment of the country, labor relations, the credit rating of the country, and all of those things. So the costs that are being indicated would be basically tentative costs that would need to be looked at in much more detail when the negotiations unfold. I think I will leave it at that. Minister, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So there was a question relating to when do we anticipate to publish the request for proposal. So the timelines according to which we are working, the minister already announced this during his budget vote speech, the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, that by the March 2024, we're looking to then release the request for proposals to the market. And that's the timeline according to which the team is working on. Then there was an issue regarding whether the determination prescribed the floating nuclear power reactors No, the determination does not prescribe any technology. So what will happen is that at the time when we release the request for proposal, the details as to the different technologies that are being considered will then be quite clearly articulated at that stage. So we have to wait until that process unfolds, because that's when you do your bid specification and you specify what type of technologies, cost and so on, and all the relevant information that we require the market to respond to. At this stage, the determination doesn't deal with technologies. Then there was a question in terms of which nuclear vendors will be considered to bid for this particular project. We've already indicated that we will follow an open bid process wherein all the different nuclear vendors would have an opportunity to bid in terms of this particular project. So that's where we're going. So you've mentioned the other bidder in terms of whether they are being considered. So at this stage, the process will then open at the time when we issue the bid, and all the bidders will have an opportunity to participate into the project and demonstrate how they can deliver this project to the South Africans. So that's where we're going and that's where we're looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DDG. Maybe just to, I think Doctor dealt with the computation in relation to the total cost of a new build. I want to respond on the issue around cheapest, and the point I was referring to is the cost of generation. Of course, you need to compute what is the cost of putting up a plant of that nature. So what is the typical tariff for new build in relation to the various technologies as I speak to you? So for PV, we know that, and I'm talking about the last rounds, not the earlier rounds, first rounds, which were exponentially higher than what I'm indicating here. If you like, the cost of generation is about 50 cents per kilowatt hour. And we know that a number of them had a serious problem in getting to financial close. When you look at the concentrated solar power, it's about 135 cents a kilowatt hour. And when you look at wind, it's about 87 cents a kilowatt hour. When you look at the open cycle gas turbine, really, this is diesel, the most expensive. You are talking about 5.80 a kilowatt hour. And when you talk of nuclear, you're talking 60 cents kilowatt hour. So that's the point that I was referring to in terms of the tariffs for purposes of generation. And I guess that if there's a premium that gets to be paid for when you construct over a period of time in terms of that tariff, you will see that the cost of generation is significantly lower. And I was sharing with you just now the relative cost of nuclear to other technologies. And then maybe just to answer what Antoinette was asking in relation to the French, I think the ambassador, in all fairness, came out much later to clarify the views that were attributed to him in the public domain. And he clarified the point that all what he was saying was not that the French companies will not be investing in the country. All that he was raising was that you need to improve an investment climate. And he was raising the issues that are known and obvious to us and which requires attention, and government is giving those attention. So really was raising objectively what are the issues that requires attention, the issues around logistics, the issues around load shedding, the issues around crime. And the point he was making is that this requires attention, and once you resolve these issues, there's going to be an accelerated interest, if you like, from French companies to invest in the country. So he was not saying that there will not be any French interest to invest in the country. I think came out very clear. And then the IRP things, I've responded to them in relation to what is possible. I did say that this is pursuant to IRP 2019, and that's why we are moving in the direction that we are moving. And then there's an issue around what the relative importance of this, I'm paraphrasing, this technology to renewables. I mean, we all accept the fact that renewables thrives on the redundancy of base load. And all that we're doing now is to indicate what is that base load sources. And of course, we're simply making the point that nuclear is part of that base load. It is part of the base load as I speak now. We're upping it by 2,500 megawatts. So there's nothing new that we're raising. There's no tension between those investments in other areas of renewables and what we are announcing now in relation to nuclear. If anything, is going to enable, if you like, us to fully benefit from those the renewables. And a valid point gets to be raised around issues of transmission. Of course, I do get to update you on the work that we are doing on the transmission side and the fact that conversations are at an advanced stage at the level of Cabinet and NICOM to ensure that we are able to introduce a framework that will make it possible for us to accelerate the rollout or the expansion of transmission and strengthening and modernization to make possible the onboarding of a new generation capacity. And of course, what we are announcing now falls into that category of new generation capacity. It can only be realized if you are able to ensure that you have expanded transmission to accommodate new generation capacity. And that's why I keep on making the point that all of these interventions in the medium, short, and long term will not realize for as long as we are not able to address the challenges on the transmission side. And the nuclear build program really, it's nothing outside that conversation. It will benefit from us being able to expand, if you like, and modernize, strengthen transmission to ensure that we are able to accommodate new sources of generation. So we see it in that way. So like I said, this then marks a process where we are triggering that process of procurement to ensure that we are able to have an energy secure future, building energy sovereignty. We talk about multiple sources of generation, and that's why the RP 19 talks about a number of sources of generation as part of the totality of generation mix. Some of them gets to be reasserted again in IRP 2023, and this is pursuant to what sits in the IRP 2019, and it's not a deviation really from what will be in the IRP 2023. Nuclear will still be a big part of generation mix in the country. So this is in that context. So I really want to take the opportunity to thank everyone. Of course, we'll be able to update you every milestone that we are making when we get closer to that procurement. Some of the questions that you have raised in relation to the architecture of that procurement will become clearer as we move down the line. So, but this for us is significant for purposes of securing an energy future for our country. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Tiki.
Thank you very much, Minister, for this briefing. And thank you to Mr. Mbambo and Dr. Mokhalapa, as well as the Minister, for all the clarity and the responses to the salient questions that were put forward from the members of the media. Thank you once again for attending our media briefing. This brings us to the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister.
People.
Sure, thanks. Thanks.